Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The snow fell thick and silent upon the crooked roof of the burrow, each flake glimmering faintly in the moonlight. Inside, the Weasley home was alive with warmth and laughter. The fire in the hearth roared cheerfully, filling the cozy kitchen with the scent of pine and baking pies. Garlands of holly and tinsel hung along the walls, and enchanted candles floated near the ceiling, casting soft golden light on everything below. It was Christmas Eve, and nearly all the Weasleys had gathered together. Molly Weasley hummed as she stirred a pot of spiced cider, her wand tapping rhythmically against the rim. Arthur sat in his favorite armchair, spectacles perched on his nose, as he examined a small Muggle contraption, a toy car that Harry had brought him as a gift. The twins, Fred and George, were pretending to help decorate the tree, though they were mostly testing their latest invention, glittering ornaments that whistled whenever someone walked by. Ron sat cross-legged near the fire, a half-wrapped present on his lap, muttering about how impossible it was to tie ribbons properly. Hermione, of course, was helping him, though she seemed more amused than annoyed. Harry sat nearby, enjoying the kind of peace he had rarely known at Privet Drive. Ginny perched on the arm of her father's chair, feeding crumbs to a sleepy, ginger-colored Puffskine. Outside, the world was hushed beneath the falling snow, and for once there seemed to be no threat of dark magic or lurking shadows. The war was over, Voldemort was gone. Christmas felt safe again, or so it seemed. Just as Molly was setting the table, a soft thud echoed from the window. Everyone turned. An owl, pale and ghostly in the snow light, was perched on the frosted sill, tapping the glass with its beak. Its eyes gleamed like tiny amber lanterns. "That's odd," Arthur murmured, rising from his chair. "We weren't expecting any post tonight." Fred grinned. "Maybe someone's sending us early presents." But when Arthur opened the window, the owl swooped in silently, scattering flakes of snow across the rug. It dropped a single letter into his hands and vanished again into the night. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, sealed with dark red wax, but the seal did not bear any familiar crest, not Hogwarts, not the Ministry, nor even Gringotts. Instead, it showed an ancient-looking rune shaped like an open eye. "What in Merlin's name?" Arthur muttered. He turned the letter over, searching for a name, but there was none. Only a single word written in neat, curling script. "The Burrow." Molly frowned. Who would send a letter to the house itself? "Let's find out," said George, leaning over his father's shoulder. Arthur broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was elegant, but hurried, as though the writer had been in a great rush. He read aloud, "To those who dwell within the burrow, be wary of what lies beneath. An old magic stirs beneath your orchard, and it will not rest quietly. Guard your hearth well before dawn." A strange silence followed. Only the wind outside whispered against the windows. "Is this someone's idea of a prank?" Ron asked, trying to sound casual, though his voice wavered slightly. Fred smirked. "Well, it does sound like something we'd write, but I promise not this time." Arthur's brow furrowed. "The orchard, that land's been in our family for generations. There's nothing there but old trees and stubborn gnomes. Molly shook her head. Arthur, perhaps it's best to ignore it. It's probably nonsense. But Hermione's eyes had gone thoughtful. An old magic beneath your orchard. It doesn't sound like a joke. And look, this rune on the seal. She pointed at the wax, now cracked. It's Norse. It means sight or revelation. Someone wanted to warn you about something that's been hidden. Before Arthur could reply, a sound drifted from outside, a faint humming noise, almost musical. Everyone froze. Then Ginny whispered, "Did anyone else hear that?" They moved to the window. Beyond the snow-covered garden, strange lights flickered through the orchard, soft green and silver glows that danced between the bare branches. "That's not normal," said Harry quietly. Arthur reached for his coat. "Stay here, all of you. I'll just..." But before he could finish, Molly grabbed his arm. "You'll not go alone, Arthur Weasley. Not on Christmas Eve, and not after a letter like that." "I'll come too," said Harry. "If it's magic, we should know what we're dealing with." Ron and Hermione nodded immediately, and Ginny crossed her arms stubbornly. "You're not leaving me behind." A moment later, they stepped out into the cold night, wands raised. The snow muffled their footsteps as they made their way toward the orchard. The trees stood black and silent, their branches glistening with frost. But the lights were real. They shimmered just beyond sight, weaving through the mist like living things. "Lumos," whispered Hermione. Her wand flared to life, casting a golden glow over the ground. At first nothing moved. Then from somewhere deep among the trees came a low rumble, like a great sigh beneath the earth. The snow trembled beneath their boots. "Arthur," Molly breathed, gripping his sleeve. It came from underground. They followed the sound to an old oak stump at the orchard's edge, a place the children used to play when they were small. The snow had melted away in a perfect circle around it, as though the earth itself had grown warm. There, half buried beneath the roots, lay a fragment of glass. Not just glass, a mirror cracked and clouded with age. Hermione crouched beside it. "That's odd. It looks enchanted." Ginny leaned closer, frowning. "It's showing something." Within the mirror's fractured surface, faint shapes began to form, shadowy outlines of faces, familiar faces. The Weasleys themselves, reflected not as they stood now, but older, paler, almost ghost-like. Then the images turned their heads and looked back at them. Molly gasped. The reflection of Arthur stepped forward within the mirror and raised its hand, then pressed it against the glass from the inside. The real Arthur stumbled backward, his breath catching. "Everyone," he said hoarsely, "back away. Now." But before they could move, the mirror shuddered, and a deep, whispering voice filled the air. "The burrow remembers what you have forgotten." The snow whirled up in a sudden gust, and the orchard lights flared brighter than ever. The Weasley family's quiet Christmas Eve had just become a night of magic and danger. The wind rose sharply, sweeping snow through the orchard in glittering swirls. The flickering lights pulsed once more, then vanished, leaving only the cracked mirror half buried in the roots of the oak stump. Silence fell, heavy and strange. Arthur knelt beside it, brushing the frost away with the edge of his glove. "It's old, older than the house itself, I'd wager," he murmured. "But who would have buried a mirror here?" Hermione crouched beside him, studying the markings etched faintly along the frame. "Runes again," she whispered. "Look, these ones are ancient. The language predates Hogwarts. It's protective magic, or at least it was meant to be." Fred bent closer, squinting. Doesn't look very protective to me. Gives me the creeps. Leave it alone, Fred, said Molly sharply. Her voice trembled despite her firmness. Whatever that thing is, we're not touching it again tonight. We'll have the ministry come by in the morning. Arthur hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution, but when he looked at his wife's face, pale and tight with worry, he nodded. All right, we'll seal the area for now. He raised his wand. Protego Maxima. A faint shimmer of blue light spread across the ground, forming a protective dome around the mirror. The hum of ancient magic softened, then fell silent. They turned back toward the house. The lights of the burrow glowed warmly through the drifting snow, and for a brief moment it almost felt safe again. Yet as they walked, Harry glanced over his shoulder. For an instant, he thought he saw movement. The faintest ripple in the air above the mirror, as though something beneath the ground had stirred. Back inside, Molly bundled everyone toward the kitchen fire, muttering about warming charms and dry socks. Fred and George exchanged uneasy glances, uncharacteristically quiet. Even the clock on the wall, whose hands bore the names of every Weasley, seemed to tick more slowly, its hands trembling between home and mortal peril. By the time they'd finished their cider, the mood had settled slightly. Ginny was curled in an armchair, with a blanket wrapped around her, while Hermione scribbled notes on a scrap of parchment, muttering to herself. Ron glanced at her over his mug. You're not seriously studying on Christmas Eve, are you? I'm not studying, Hermione replied. I'm thinking. That letter warned about old magic beneath the orchard. Mirrors are powerful magical conduits, symbols of truth and reflection. But the one outside isn't reflecting truth, it's remembering something, showing what used to be or what could have been. Arthur frowned. You mean it's alive? In a way, Hermione said softly. Some magical objects can hold echoes, impressions left by strong emotions or powerful spells. If that mirror's been there since before your family settled here, it might contain memories of the land itself. That's a comforting thought, George muttered. Maybe it'll show us Uncle Bilious dancing without his trousers again. Enough of that, said Molly. We'll not speak of that mirror again tonight. It's Christmas, and I'll not have everyone fretting over ghosts and cursed glass. Harry smiled faintly. She's right. We'll deal with it tomorrow. Tonight we rest. But the house seemed reluctant to rest. Long after everyone had gone to bed, the wind continued to whisper around the eaves, and the old floorboards creaked as though remembering footsteps long gone. In the attic, the ghoul moaned softly, restless in its sleep. Harry woke near midnight to a faint sound, a voice. It came from somewhere beyond the window, low and indistinct, like someone murmuring through glass. He sat up, heart pounding. Ron stirred beside him, but didn't wake. Harry. The whisper was clearer now, a woman's voice, soft and pleading. He crossed the room, pushed the curtain aside, and looked out. The orchard lay white and still, yet from beneath the snow he saw it again. The shimmer of green light, faint, but unmistakable. Something was calling. He dressed quickly, grabbed his wand, and crept down the stairs. The house was silent, save for the steady tick of the clock. As he passed the sitting room, he paused. One of the family portraits, a painting of the burrow from years past, was glowing faintly. Inside the frame, the painted sky rippled, and for a heartbeat, Harry saw a shadow pass across it. He hurried outside, boots crunching through the snow. The air was cold and sharp enough to sting his lungs. He followed the faint light through the orchard until he reached the oak stump again. The mirror was uncovered. The protective dome Arthur had cast was gone. The snow melted away. The mirror stood upright now, its cracked surface gleaming faintly in the moonlight. "Who's there?" Harry called. The reflection stared back at him. Only it wasn't him. It was another Harry, pale and hollow-eyed, wearing robes torn and stained with ash. Behind him the reflected orchard burned, trees crackling with green fire. The image raised its wand. Harry flinched, but no spell came. Instead, the reflection spoke in a hoarse whisper that echoed inside his head. "You must not wake it." "Wake what?" Harry demanded. The reflection's mouth opened, but no sound came, only a rush of cold wind that swept through the orchard. The mirror flickered, and suddenly the image changed. Now he saw the burrow itself, only not as it stood today. Its walls were scorched, its windows shattered. The clock on the wall was frozen at midnight, every hand pointing to mortal peril. Harry stumbled back. "No!" A hand caught his shoulder. He spun around, wand raised, only to see Ron, bleary-eyed and barefoot, holding a blanket around his shoulders. "Blimey, Harry, what are you doing out here?" Harry gestured toward the mirror, but the image was gone. The glass was dull and empty once more. I thought I saw something," Harry said. "Someone." Ron rubbed his arms. "Well, next time, try not to wander off into cursed orchards in the middle of the night. Mum will have kittens." As they turned back toward the house, neither noticed the faint glow that lingered beneath the snow, a pulse of green light that beat softly like the rhythm of a sleeping heart. Inside, the house had grown unnaturally quiet. Even the ghoul in the attic had gone silent. As Harry climbed the stairs, he noticed something else. The family clock on the wall had shifted. All the hands now pointed not to home, but to watching. The burrow was awake, and beneath its foundations, something ancient stirred, listening to the whispers of its old mirror, remembering the days before the Weasleys ever called it home. Morning came, gray and heavy with mist. The orchard lay silent under a thin crust of frost. The snow hardened to ice in the night. Inside the burrow, the fire had burned low, and the usual cheerful bustle of breakfast was subdued. Even the clock on the wall ticked more slowly than usual, as though the house itself were holding its breath. Molly was the first to notice the change. As she reached for her knitting basket, her hand brushed against something cold, a sliver of glass no larger than a coin. It gleamed faintly with a greenish light before crumbling into dust. She frowned, brushing it away, but the unease in her chest grew. "Arthur," she called softly, "come look at this." Her husband, still in his dressing gown, peered down at the empty space where the shard had been. "Leftover charm work, maybe," he said, though his tone betrayed little confidence. "Something to do with that mirror, I shouldn't wonder." "Then it's leaking into the house," she whispered. "I can feel it like static in the air." At that moment, a door creaked overhead, and Ron came stumbling down the stairs, followed by Harry and Hermione. They looked tired, as though they had slept badly. Ginny followed last, her hair tangled and eyes red from lack of sleep. Harry hesitated before speaking. "I went outside last night," he admitted. Molly spun toward him, horrified. "Harry Potter! After what happened yesterday?" "I had to see it," he said quickly. "The mirror, it wasn't buried anymore. It stood upright, and I saw something. Another version of me. He warned me not to wake it." Then it changed. I saw the burrow burning. The kitchen fell silent. Even the clock seemed to pause its ticking. Hermione's brow furrowed. Mirrors that reveal visions are rare, but not unheard of. The mirror of Arist, for example, showed desire. But this one seems different. More like a window. Arthur rubbed his temples. If it's been sealed under the orchard for this long, it might be connected to the old wards. My great-grandfather built them when we first settled here. There were rumors the land had seen battle during the Goblin rebellions. Ron swallowed. You mean it could be some leftover curse? Before anyone could answer, Fred and George burst in through the back door, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Mum, you'll want to see this," said Fred breathlessly. "The gnomes are gone." "Gone?" said Arthur. "What do you mean gone?" "Every last one," George said. "Their burrows are empty. There are holes all over the orchard, but not a single gnome in sight." "Maybe they finally got tired of being flung over the fence," muttered Ginny. "No," said Harry quietly. "They left because something else is there now." The family exchanged uneasy looks. Hermione closed her notebook with a snap. "We should investigate in daylight. If something ancient is waking beneath your orchard, it could be dangerous to ignore it. But we must be careful. Disturbing old magic can have consequences." Molly sighed. "At last eat first. Nothing dreadful should happen on an empty stomach." They ate quickly, though no one seemed to taste their food, and by mid-morning the Weasleys, Harry, and Hermione were trudging through the frost toward the orchard once more. The protective dome Arthur had cast was gone, as though it had never been there. The ground around the oak stump was churned up, patches of frozen earth scattered in uneven circles, and there, lying half buried again, was the mirror. Only now it was whole. The cracks that had splintered its surface the night before were gone, replaced by smooth glass that shimmered faintly like water. Hermione stepped closer, cautious. "That shouldn't be possible," she whispered. "Restoration magic doesn't work like this unless the object is regenerating itself." Arthur raised his wand. "Finite incantatem." The light from his wand hit the glass and vanished without effect. Then the reflection shifted. The trees in the mirror's surface were not bare and snow-laden, but green and full of life, bathed in summer sunlight. Shadows moved among the branches, figures dressed in old-fashioned robes, their faces indistinct. A tall man in dark green reached into the soil near the stump and placed something gleaming into the ground. Molly clutched Arthur's arm. "That's this place," she whispered. "That's our orchard." The man in green looked up suddenly, as though sensing their gaze. His eyes, though blurred by time, met theirs through the glass. He raised a hand and spoke, though no sound came, yet the words etched themselves into the frost upon the frame. "Guard the heart, or the house shall remember." Hermione gasped. The heart! It could mean the magical core of the land, the source that feeds the burrow's protective enchantments. Ginny took a step back. "So the mirror isn't cursed, it's a warning." But before Hermione could answer, the earth beneath their feet trembled. Snow slid from the trees, and a deep groan echoed from below, as though the ground itself were breathing. "Back!" Arthur shouted, pulling Molly behind him. The soil at the base of the oak stump cracked open, revealing a narrow crevice glowing faintly with green light. The mirror tipped forward, then sank into the opening as though drawn by invisible hands. When the tremor ceased, all that remained was a shallow pit filled with soft, pulsing light. "What now?" Ron whispered. "We go down," said Harry quietly. "It's calling to us." Molly's voice shook. "Harry James Potter, you most certainly will not." But Arthur held up a hand. "No, Molly. He's right. If that mirror connects to whatever lies beneath our home, we need to know what we're dealing with." One by one, they descended into the crevice. The tunnel beneath was narrow, the walls slick with roots that glowed faintly as they brushed past. It twisted downward like the throat of the earth itself, until at last they reached a chamber. The air inside was warm and humming with power. In the center stood the mirror, now tall as a door, hovering above a pool of clear water. Runes blazed along its frame, casting green light over the cavern. Hermione stepped forward. "This isn't a mirror anymore, it's a gate." "To where?" asked Ron. "Not where," she murmured. "When?" The mirror rippled like liquid, and once again the orchard appeared. But this time the image was filled with chaos. Wizards in old robes clashed with goblins wielding enchanted blades. Spells burst like fireworks. The air shimmered with raw power. Among the wizards, Harry saw the man in green again. He was shouting, gesturing toward the burrow. Though in this vision, it was only a half-built cottage. He plunged a wand into the ground, sending a wave of light through the soil. The image blurred, then stilled. Ginny whispered, "He was protecting it." The burrow, that's why the magic feels alive. It was built over the battlefield's heart. Hermione's eyes widened. And the mirror is the key that binds it. The warning said not to wake it, because if the heart is disturbed, the land might relive its past. Suddenly, the runes flared, brighter, and the pool beneath the mirror began to churn. The ground shook violently, throwing them off balance. Fred grabbed George's arm. "Tell me this isn't another one of your tricks." "Not this time," George muttered, eyes wide. A voice rose from the mirror, not a whisper now, but a chorus, echoing from every corner of the chamber. "The heart is unguarded. The house remembers." And then, with a thunderous crack, the mirror exploded in light. When it faded, they were no longer standing in the cavern. They were standing in the orchard, but the snow was gone, replaced by long grass and summer air. The trees were whole again. In the distance, the burrow stood, half-finished, smoke rising from its new chimney. Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. "We're in the past." Hermione's hand trembled as she clutched her wand. "No, not in the past. We're caught in its memory." The mirror had not shown them a vision this time. It had taken them inside it. And somewhere, deep beneath the ground, the burrow's sleeping heart began to beat once more. The air shimmered with warmth and the scent of summer grass. Birds sang from the leafy orchard, and sunlight spilled through the branches, dappling the ground in gold. The Weasleys, Harry and Hermione, stood frozen, blinking against the sudden brilliance. Moments ago, they had been in the cold, dark cavern beneath their home. Now they stood in a world that breathed with life. But something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy with magic, and the colors seemed sharper than they should be, as though painted in dreamlike hues. "The mirror," Hermione murmured. "It's drawn us into its memory. We're walking through the past." Arthur looked around slowly. The burrow, smaller, humbler, its walls fresh and clean, stood at the edge of the field. The chimney puffed steady smoke, and tools lay scattered near the fence. He took a step toward it, but his foot left no print in the grass. "We're not really here," he said quietly. "The land's memory won't let us leave a trace." "Still," said Harry, gripping his wand tightly, "whatever this is, we need to understand why we've been brought here." From the orchard's edge, voices drifted on the breeze, men shouting orders, the sharp ring of magic clashing against metal. The sound carried the weight of battle. They hurried toward it, and soon the trees opened onto a clearing. What they saw made Ginny's breath catch in her throat. Dozens of wizards were gathered in formation, their robes tattered, faces grim. Some bore banners marked with the crest of a serpent devouring its own tail. Others, fewer in number, carried wands alight with pale blue fire. Between them, goblins in heavy armor pressed forward, their eyes bright with fury, curved blades gleaming in the sun. "This is the Goblin Rebellion," Hermione whispered. "This battle must have been fought right here, where the burrow now stands." Arthur's eyes widened as he spotted the tall man in green at the head of the smaller group. His face was clearer now, stern, lined with age and wisdom, his eyes gray as weathered stone. "That's Eldrick Weasley," Arthur breathed. "My great-great-grandfather. He was a wand maker and a war wizard in the old days." They watched as Eldrick raised his wand. "Hold the line," he shouted. "Protect the heart. If it falls, the house will crumble, and the magic of the valley with it." The goblins surged forward. Spells burst through the air, crimson and gold. Trees exploded into splinters. The earth shook beneath the force of ancient magic. Then Harry saw it, the object Eldrick was defending. In the center of the clearing, half buried in the soil, stood a stone altar, carved with runes that glowed faintly green. Upon it rested a crystalline heart, pulsing with soft light. "The heart of the land," Hermione murmured. "He's protecting the source of their ward magic." Eldrick turned suddenly, eyes locking on something invisible, perhaps sensing the intruders from another time. "Who watches?" he called, voice echoing strangely through the haze. "Friend or foe?" Harry hesitated. "He can't hear us," Hermione whispered, but Eldrick's gaze sharpened. "Beware the mirror," he said, his words faint but distinct. "It remembers too much. It binds the past and the present, and through memory, the heart beats again." The battle roared around him. A goblin blade slashed across his arm, but he didn't falter. He thrust his wand toward the ground. "By my name and by my blood, let the burrow stand eternal." Light exploded outward, engulfing the clearing in a wave of green fire. The goblins vanished in an instant, swept away as though erased from time. When the smoke cleared, only Eldrick remained, kneeling before the altar, breathing hard. He pressed his hand against the crystalline heart, and his voice softened. "My work is done," he murmured. "The heart is sealed. Let the house remember." The vision began to fade. The sunlight dimmed, colors draining away until only shadow remained. The orchard withered before their eyes. The trees shriveled, the grass blackened. In moments, the bright summer field was gone, replaced once more by the cold winter of the present. They stood in the orchard again. But it was not as they had left it. The snow was gone, yet the air was frigid, heavy with a stillness that made their skin crawl. The ground glowed faintly green in the cracks where the mirror had been. "Did we come back?" Ron asked uncertainly. Hermione looked around. "Yes, but something's wrong. The wards feel twisted. I think the mirror tried to anchor us halfway between memory and reality." Arthur turned toward the burrow and froze. The house was different. The familiar red roof sagged as though under invisible weight, and faint shapes moved behind the frosted windows. Figures that shouldn't have been there. Molly gasped. "Arthur, those are us." In the window, ghostly reflections of the family stood still, their faces pale and solemn. The other Molly reached up to close the curtains, but the real one felt a chill, as though a cold hand had brushed her shoulder. "The house remembers," Hermione whispered. "We've awakened the memory completely. The burrows past and present are merging." They hurried back inside, but the warmth that had once filled the home was gone. The fire still burned, yet it gave no heat. The clock on the wall spun wildly, its hands flickering between home, danger, and lost. Arthur reached for it, but when his fingers touched the frame, the wood turned cold and damp, like stone. The walls trembled, and a whisper rose from the floors, faint but unmistakable. "Guard the heart." Harry stepped forward. "The heart must still be under the orchard. Maybe the mirror's magic disturbed it." Hermione nodded. "If we don't restore the wards, the burrow could collapse, or worse, it could keep drawing power from its memories until it consumes itself." "How do we fix it?" Ginny asked. "We find the heart," Hermione said firmly, "and we seal it again." They armed themselves quickly, scarves, coats, wands, and ventured once more into the frozen orchard. The green glow beneath the oak stump had grown brighter, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. When they reached it, the air thrummed with power. Snow swirled upward in slow spirals, defying gravity. The ground beneath their boots was no longer earth, but translucent crystal, faintly alive with light. Hermione crouched, pressing her hand to the surface. "The heart is awakening. It's drawing on our magic, our emotions. That's why we were pulled into the memory. It feeds on those who carry ties to this land." Arthur's expression hardened. "Then let it feed on me instead. The burrow is my family's legacy. If my ancestor sealed it, I can do the same." He stepped forward, raising his wand high. "By blood and by name, I command the burrow to sleep again." A flash of green light burst from the ground, wrapping around him like tendrils of smoke. He staggered but held firm, chanting words none of the others could understand. The air crackled, sparks flaring between his hands and the earth. Then a voice rose from below, low and familiar. It was Eldric's voice. "One cannot silence memory without a price." Arthur gasped as light flared from his chest. The ground beneath him split, revealing the crystalline heart, brighter now, pulsing like a living thing. Molly cried out, "Arthur!" Harry lunged forward, seizing Arthur's arm and dragging him back. Just as the heart flared, the light surged upward, striking the sky in a pillar of green flame. When it faded, Arthur lay gasping on the ground. The glow beneath the orchard dimmed, returning to a faint shimmer. "It's sealed," Hermione said softly. "But not completely. The heart's still awake, only sleeping lightly." Arthur sat up weakly, brushing snow from his sleeve. "Then we'll have to watch over it," he said, voice rough but steady. "Our family. Forever, if need be." The others nodded. The air slowly warmed, and the soft glow faded from the orchard. When they returned to the burrow, the clock ticked calmly once more. The fire burned true, the walls no longer whispered. But as the family gathered by the hearth, Harry noticed something glimmering faintly above the mantel. A small fragment of glass, just the size of a coin. It caught the firelight and shone with a soft green hue. He said nothing. Outside, beneath the orchard's roots, the heart of the burrow pulsed once, slow, patient, eternal, before sinking into silence once more. The following morning dawned quiet and colorless, the sky a pale wash above the frost-laden hills. The burrow looked as it always had, leaning slightly to one side, its roof patched in half a dozen shades of red, smoke curling from the crooked chimney. But a strange stillness lingered in the air. The memory of the night before hung over the household like a thin veil of mist. Molly moved softly through the kitchen, setting bread to toast and stirring a cauldron of porridge. She hummed under her breath, a tune that faltered every few notes. The scent of cinnamon filled the air, yet even that homely warmth could not quite drive away the unease. Her eyes wandered again and again to the window, where the orchard slept beneath its crust of frost. Arthur joined her a moment later, his face pale and drawn. The circles beneath his eyes betrayed that he had not slept. Still he kissed her cheek, as he always did, and murmured, "It's over now, Molly Wobbles. Whatever magic we stirred down there, I think it's settled again." But Molly did not answer. She was staring at the family clock. The hands rested where they ought, home, yet she could not ignore the faint shimmer that passed across the glass every few seconds, like a reflection of unseen light. The rest of the family emerged gradually from the upper floors. Ron was yawning and muttering about food. Hermione already had parchment in hand, and Ginny looked unusually pale, her red hair tangled about her shoulders. Fred and George tried to jest, but their laughter sounded hollow. "I kept dreaming of the mirror," Ginny said at last. "It was whispering to me. Something about unfinished bonds." Hermione looked up sharply. "The mirror's gone, Ginny." "I know," she said quietly, "but it hasn't stopped talking." Silence fell over the table. Then Harry said, "If the heart isn't completely sealed, maybe the mirror's energy is still reaching out, trying to anchor itself again." Arthur frowned. "Could be. The Weasley wards are bound by blood and memory. That mirror might have attached itself to our family line. The burrow is full of charms that respond to our presence. It might be that the mirror's remnants are trying to join with them." Molly crossed herself with her wand hand. "Well, it can join elsewhere. I'll not have cursed glass haunting my kitchen." But as she spoke, a faint tink sounded from the hearth. Everyone turned. There, beside the crackling fire, a small fragment of glass had slid from the mantel, the same fragment Harry had noticed the night before. It glowed faintly in the flames, its green light reflecting in each of their eyes. Fred approached it cautiously. "Looks harmless enough." "Don't touch it," Hermione warned, but he had already reached out. The moment his finger brushed the shard, it pulsed. Light burst from it, soft at first, then blinding. The entire room seemed to tilt. The fire roared upward, and the walls rippled as though made of water. "Fred!" George shouted, grabbing his brother's arm, but it was too late. Both twins were caught in the glow, their outlines flickering like candle flames in a gust. "Hold on!" shouted Harry, diving forward. He seized George's sleeve and pulled with all his strength, but the light wrapped around them both, swallowing them whole. In an instant, they were gone. The kitchen fell silent except for the low crackle of the fire. "Fred!" Ginny cried. "George! Harry!" Arthur's hand trembled as he raised his wand toward the hearth. "They've been pulled through a residual rift," he said grimly. "The mirror's memory, its magic, wasn't finished with us." Hermione's face had gone white. "Then it's trying to reclaim what was lost. It's drawing them back into the heart's dream." Molly's voice broke. "We can't just leave them there." "We won't," said Arthur, his tone steadying. "But if we rush in blindly, we might lose everyone. The mirror's magic is rooted in reflection. It'll try to show us what we fear most." Hermione nodded. "Then we'll use that against it. The heart responds to memory and emotion. If we anchor ourselves to the present, to love, to what's real, we can cross into the mirror's realm without being trapped by illusion." Ron swallowed hard. "You mean we're going back into that thing?" Hermione met his eyes. "We have to." Within minutes, they stood again in the orchard. Snowflakes drifted lightly through the cold air. The place where the mirror had once been was bare, save for a faint circle of light that shimmered upon the ground. Hermione drew a rune in the air with her wand. "Memoria Aperta." The circle expanded, its glow deepening to emerald green. A faint hum rose, the same low vibration they had heard beneath the orchard before. Molly clutched Arthur's arm. "Please be careful." Arthur nodded. "Always, my dear." Then he turned to the others. "Hold tight to one another, no matter what we see. Remember who you are and where you belong." They stepped into the light. The world shifted once more. This time they found themselves in a reflection of the burrow. But it was wrong. The walls leaned farther than they should. The staircase twisted upward like a spine, and the portraits on the walls whispered among themselves in voices too low to understand. The air smelled faintly of smoke and old rain. "Where are we?" Ron whispered. "In the house's memory," said Hermione, "but it's been altered." A faint laugh echoed from upstairs, familiar and yet not. "Fred?" Ginny called, her voice trembling. "George?" Another laugh answered, a mockery of their brother's tone. From the shadows at the top of the stairs, two figures emerged. They looked like Fred and George, but their eyes glowed faintly green, and their smiles were wrong. Their reflections moved a fraction slower than their bodies, trailing behind like echoes. "You shouldn't have come," one said. His voice was both Fred's and not Fred's. "The mirror wants what it lost. It remembers every face that ever looked into it." Arthur raised his wand. "Where are the real Fred and George? And Harry?" The twin reflections smiled wider. "They're here, in the glass. You'll see them soon." Then, as one, they vanished. The walls groaned, and mirrors appeared where there had been none before. Tall, narrow panes of rippling glass that lined the corridor. Within each reflection, the Weasleys saw glimpses of themselves, not as they were, but as they feared to be. Ron saw himself standing alone in an empty field, his friends turned away. Ginny saw a world where Tom Riddle's laughter filled every corner of her mind. Molly saw her family's faces fading one by one. Hermione shut her eyes tightly. "Don't look. It feeds on fear. It wants you to believe these reflections are real." But Arthur had already stepped forward, staring into one of the mirrors. Inside it, he saw the burrow in flames, his children trapped inside while he stood powerless. His knees buckled. "Arthur!" Molly cried, pulling him back. The fire in the mirror flickered and died. "Love!" Hermione gasped, realization dawning. "That's the key." The heart of the burrow was built on family, on love. It can't harm what it was made to protect. They joined hands, forming a circle in the twisting hallway. The mirrors around them shimmered, their images rippling like water. "Think of home," Hermione whispered, "of the real burrow. The laughter, the warmth, the life in it. That's our way back." They focused together, eyes closed, hearts steady. A deep hum rose from the floor, shaking the air. The mirrors began to crack, first one then another, until the entire house was filled with the sound of shattering glass. When the last mirror broke, a wave of white light washed over them. Moments later, they were standing once more in the real orchard, the frost glinting under the pale winter sun. Harry lay nearby, covered in snow, blinking dazedly. Beside him, Fred and George stirred, groaning. "Did we win?" Fred muttered. George grinned weakly. "If this is the afterlife, it's awfully cold." Molly ran to them, gathering both sons into her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. Arthur helped Harry to his feet, clapping him on the shoulder. "The mirror's gone," Hermione said softly, scanning the orchard. "Truly gone, this time." For a long while, none of them spoke. The winter air was crisp and clear, and the light that filtered through the branches seemed purer than before. At last, Arthur turned to the house. "The burrow remembers," he said, "but now it remembers love first." They walked back together, their footprints marking a single winding path through the snow. Far beneath them, deep in the earth's quiet heart, a faint heartbeat echoed once, gentle, content, and then faded into peaceful silence. The snow that fell that night was softer than before, drifting lazily from a sky heavy with stars. The burrow slept, peacefully at last, its chimney breathing gentle smoke, its windows glowing warm and steady. Yet inside, the family did not sleep. The memory of the mirror's voice lingered too near the heart for rest to come easily. Molly sat by the hearth, knitting forgotten in her lap, her gaze fixed on the flames. Arthur dozed in the armchair beside her, wand slipping from his fingers every few minutes before he woke with a start. The others had gone to bed hours ago, but the house still whispered faintly around them, the old timbers creaking, the clock ticking in its patient rhythm. "I keep hearing it," she said softly. Arthur stirred. "Hearing what, my dear?" "The mirror," Molly murmured. "Or the heart, perhaps. Sometimes it's only the wind, but then again, sometimes I think it's breathing, as though the house dreams." Arthur smiled faintly, weary but tender. The burrow has always dreamed. It stood through war, through peace, through the raising of 7 children and 1,000 meals. It's bound to us. It wouldn't be the burrow if it didn't hum with life. Molly nodded, though her heart felt heavy. "Life, yes. But I wonder if we've woken something that should have stayed asleep." Above them, the stairs creaked. Hermione appeared in her dressing gown, her hair tangled, her eyes bright with restless thought. "I couldn't sleep," she said quietly. "There's something odd about the wards. I can feel them shifting. It's not dangerous exactly, but it's unsettled, like the house is listening." Arthur rose, rubbing his temples. "The magic's been disturbed. It may take time to resettle." Hermione hesitated. "What if it doesn't? The burrow's wards were forged from memory and family bond. If the mirror fed on those same things, then the heart's essence might be intertwined with your lineage now. That means it's alive and aware of you." Molly's knitting slipped to the floor. "Aware? You mean the house is watching us?" "Not watching," Hermione corrected gently. "Protecting, but it might manifest in strange ways until it understands the difference between its memories and the present." A soft thud sounded from the ceiling above them, followed by another. "That'll be the ghoul," Arthur said, though his voice carried little conviction. "I don't think so," said Hermione. They climbed the narrow staircase together, wands lit. The shadows stretched long against the walls. the flicker of their light revealing every crooked picture frame and patched bit of wallpaper. When they reached the landing, they found Ron standing in the doorway of the twins' old room, looking pale and wide-eyed. "Did you see that?" he asked. "See what?" Arthur said. Ron pointed toward the end of the hall. The door to Ginny's room stood slightly ajar, and a faint green glow pulsed from within, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Hermione stepped forward. "Stay behind me." She pushed the door open. Inside, the room was as it had always been, stacks of Quidditch magazines, parchment scattered across the desk, a small collection of enchanted trinkets glinting faintly in the dark. But in the center of the floor lay a single glass shard, the last piece of the mirror, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Ginny sat beside it, her face calm but distant. Her eyes were half closed, as though she were dreaming with her eyes open. "Ginny!" Molly rushed forward, but Hermione caught her arm. "Wait. The shard's still charged with magic. If you touch her now, it might react." Arthur raised his wand. "Finite." The words froze in his throat as Ginny spoke, softly, in a voice that wasn't quite her own. "It's lonely," she said. "It remembers warmth, laughter. It doesn't understand why we sealed it away." Hermione swallowed. "The heart?" Ginny's head tilted slightly. "Yes, it sleeps, but it dreams. It wants to see again, to feel again." "Ginny," Molly whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Come back, love. You're scaring us." For a moment, the girl's eyes flickered, the brown shifting briefly to green, then back again. "It means no harm," she said softly, "but it cannot rest while part of it remains here. The shard must be returned." "Returned where?" Arthur asked. "To the heart," said Ginny, "before the next sunrise." Then she slumped forward. Arthur caught her before she hit the floor. The light in the shard faded, leaving only the faintest echo of warmth. Hermione knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to Ginny's wrist. "She's fine," she said, "just drained, but we don't have much time." Arthur looked toward the window. The first traces of dawn were beginning to gray the horizon. "Then we go now?" Molly protested, but Arthur's expression left no room for argument. Together they carried Ginny downstairs, wrapping her in a cloak. The shard, now dull and harmless looking, glimmered faintly in Hermione's palm. Outside, the orchard stood waiting. The snow crunched beneath their boots, and the faintest breeze whispered through the bare branches. Hermione knelt at the base of the oak stump and brushed away the frost. "The heart lies deep beneath this spot. We'll need to use the same passage as before." Arthur and Ron helped clear the snow, and soon the faint glow of the hidden tunnel shimmered once more. They descended carefully, Ginny resting against Molly's shoulder. The air grew warmer as they went, filled with the hum of magic. When they reached the chamber, they found it just as before, the crystalline heart pulsing gently in the center, its light reflecting off the wet stone walls. Hermione stepped forward. "We have to return the shard, but it must be done freely, without fear or resentment. The heart binds emotion to its magic. If we give it bitterness, it will turn against us." Arthur nodded. "Then it will have love instead." He took the shard from Hermione, holding it over the glowing heart. "This house has seen laughter and loss," he said softly. "It has sheltered us in war and in peace. Whatever magic you hold, let it bind with kindness, not sorrow." He placed the shard into the crystal's center. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the heart flared to life, its light swelling until it filled the chamber. Warmth swept through them, gentle as a summer wind. Ginny stirred, whispering something unintelligible. The ground trembled faintly, but it was not violent, more like a sigh. The crystal's light dimmed to a soft, steady glow. The humming ceased. "It's done," Hermione said. "The heart is whole again." They climbed back to the surface as dawn broke. The sky streaked with gold and rose. The burrow stood bathed in morning light, its windows gleaming, its old roof bright against the pale horizon. Molly let out a long, shaky breath. "It's over then." Arthur wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "For now," he said with a tired smile. But even as they turned toward the house, none of them noticed the faint shimmer that rippled across the orchard's frost, a subtle pulse that beat in time with the rising sun. The burrow was whole once more, its heart at peace. Yet beneath its ancient roots, magic still flowed like a quiet river, alive and waiting. And though the family could not hear it, the earth itself seemed to whisper, deep and slow and certain, "The house remembers." The week that followed was one of rare quiet at the burrow. The days were pale and crisp, each dawn spilling silver over the fields of Ottery St. Catchpole, and each night closing with a soft crackle of firelight and the smell of Molly's bread baking in the oven. The heart of the house had been soothed, or so it seemed. The strange whispering had faded, the mirrors no longer rippled, and for the first time in many nights, the Weasleys slept without fear, and yet beneath that calm, a sense of watchfulness remained, subtle but constant. The burrow listened. Arthur could feel it in the grain of the old wood beneath his hands when he repaired a loose stair. Molly heard it in the rhythm of the fire's hiss. Ginny sometimes paused in the garden, head tilted, as if hearing a voice only she could discern. Hermione and Harry, still visiting, spent their days poring through the Weasley family's oldest books, hunting for any reference to the mirror or the heart. By the fourth evening, they had found something. "It's not just your family's land that's bound to old magic," Hermione explained as they sat around the long kitchen table. The entire valley was once called the Hollow of Hearths. It was a sanctuary during the Goblin Wars, enchanted to protect those who called it home. The Weasleys didn't just inherit the burrow, they inherited the duty of guarding that ancient power. Arthur nodded slowly. "So the heart beneath us, the mirror, the dreams, it's part of a greater enchantment." "Exactly," Hermione said. "The house isn't just alive because of your family's magic. It's alive because it was meant to be. A guardian born from memory." Ron frowned. "All right, that's grand and all, but what happens if it decides it doesn't like us anymore?" Molly sent him a sharp look. The burrow would never turn on its own. But Arthur's eyes had drifted to the window. The orchard was silver with frost again, though the air outside was still, and just for a heartbeat he thought he saw movement, something tall and pale, standing among the trees. "Perhaps," he murmured, "we should make certain of that." That night the wind changed. It swept down from the hills, rattling the loose shutters and moaning through the chimney. The fire burned low. One by one the candles guttered and died. The burrow sank into darkness. Then from the orchard came a knock. Just once, 3 measured raps upon the back door. Molly froze where she stood. "Arthur," she whispered. He rose, wand in hand, and crossed the kitchen. The knock came again, louder now. When he opened the door, a gust of cold air swept in, carrying the scent of rain and earth. No one stood upon the threshold. Only a trail of footprints led from the darkness to the steps. Bare footprints, too large for a man, their edges faintly glowing green. Before he could speak, Ginny appeared behind him, clutching her wand. "It's the heart," she said softly. "It's sending something." "Sending?" Arthur echoed. "What do you mean?" She looked pale, her voice distant. "It's trying to remember its guardian." At that moment, something stirred among the trees, a flicker of light moving between the trunks, slow and deliberate. Arthur and Ginny stepped out into the night, the others following close behind. Snowflakes began to fall again, but they melted before touching the ground, as if the air itself was too charged with magic. In the center of the orchard stood a figure. He was tall, wrapped in robes of green and gray, his face hidden beneath the hood, yet his presence felt achingly familiar, like a dream half recalled. Arthur's breath caught. Eldrick Weasley. The figure lifted his head. Beneath the hood, a face of pale light emerged, neither solid nor ghostly, but something between. His eyes glowed faintly, like embers at the edge of dawn. "You have woken the heart," said the spirit, his voice low and calm, though it seemed to come from the air itself. "And now it remembers its charge." Arthur stepped forward. "You're my ancestor." "I am what remains of him," the figure replied. The guardian's echo. "My duty was to bind the magic of this valley to a home so that it might shelter those who seek safety. But each generation must renew the bond. Without it, the heart weakens. The mirror's fall was a warning." Hermione spoke, her tone respectful but firm. "Then tell us how to keep it safe. What must we do?" The figure's gaze turned to Ginny. "The heart has chosen already. The burrow listens to her voice. Through her, it will breathe anew." Molly's hand flew to her mouth. "Ginny?" The girl swallowed hard. I don't understand." Eldrick extended a hand of light toward her. "The bond between house and blood must be sealed with remembrance. The guardian's heir must offer one memory freely given to the heart. Something precious, something true. It will keep the magic whole." Ginny hesitated. "If I give it, what happens to the memory?" "It will no longer be yours," said Eldrick. "It will belong to the house forever." Arthur looked at his daughter, pride and sorrow warring in his face. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," she said quietly. "It's our home." She stepped forward into the snow, standing before the spectral figure. "If I give a memory," she said, "I want it to be one that means love." Eldrick bowed his head. "Then speak it." Ginny closed her eyes. "I remember the summer after the war," she whispered, "when we rebuilt the garden. Harry and I planted sunflowers by the fence. I remember the smell of earth and Mum's laughter, and how for the first time in years, the house felt safe again." A tear slipped down her cheek. Light bloomed from her chest. Soft, golden light, not green. It drifted from her hands like threads of silk, weaving toward the air above the orchard. The trees shuddered, their branches rustling as though exhaling. The light spread until it filled every corner of the burrow's grounds, touching the walls, the chimney, even the crooked fence. Then as quickly as it had come, the light faded. The snow fell again, gentle and white. Eldrick's form began to dissolve. "The bond is renewed," he said. "The burrow will endure." His gaze softened as he looked upon them one last time. "Guard it well, and remember, what lives in memory never dies." The wind swept through the orchard, scattering the last of his light. For a long while no one moved. Ginny stood silently, her breath clouding in the cold air. Harry stepped beside her, taking her hand. "Do you remember it, the sunflowers?" She shook her head, smiling faintly. "No. But I remember the warmth. That's enough." Arthur placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than you know, Ginny." They turned back toward the burrow, the familiar glow of its windows shining through the mist. The old house seemed to stand taller somehow, its crooked walls humming softly with a renewed, living warmth. Inside, the fire blazed high, brighter than before, and the air smelled faintly of sunflowers. For the first time since the mirror's awakening, the burrow felt entirely at peace, and outside in the orchard, the snow fell in silence, covering the footprints, the shimmer of magic, and the last trace of the guardian's light. But deep beneath the earth, the heart beat strong and steady, its rhythm echoing through the roots, the stones, and the timbers of the house it loved. The burrow was awake, and it would remember always. The new year came quietly to Ottery St. Catchpole. Snow blanketed the hills, the river froze into a ribbon of glass, and the trees bowed under the weight of winter's silence. Inside the burrow, warmth glowed from every window. Laughter once more filled the crooked old house, though it was a gentler laughter now, tinged with wonder and relief. Ginny had slept deeply for the first time in days, her dreams filled, not with mirrors or strange lights, but with the gentle hum of the hearth and the creak of the house settling in the wind. When she woke, sunlight poured through her window, casting golden patterns on the walls. For the first time, the burrow felt alive, not watching her, but breathing beside her, a companion rather than a guardian. Downstairs, breakfast was already underway. The table was crowded as always. Molly bustling between dishes, Arthur muttering excitedly over a broken Muggle radio, Ron stealing bacon while Hermione scolded him, and Fred and George whispering plans that promised more chaos than comfort. Harry sat beside Ginny, his smile soft and easy. It might have been any morning at all, if not for the faint rhythm beneath their feet, a heartbeat too deep to belong to any living creature. Molly noticed it first, her spoon stilled in the porridge pot. "Arthur," she said, her voice low, "do you feel that?" Arthur paused, frowning. "Aye," he murmured. "It's the house again." But this time there was no unease in his tone. The steady pulse beneath the floorboards felt calm, content almost, as though the very foundations of the burrow were sighing in satisfaction. Hermione placed her hand upon the table. "It's stable," she said. "The heart has settled. I can feel it aligning with the wards again. It's not a warning, it's a rhythm of life." Arthur smiled. "Then perhaps the burrow's thanking us." Yet as the day passed, small oddities began to stir once more, though these were of a gentler kind. When Ginny walked past the window, the frost formed faint shapes that looked suspiciously like blooming flowers. Fred's dropped quill rose from the floor by itself and spun cheerfully in midair before landing neatly in the ink pot. The air around the hearth shimmered, showing glimpses of warm summer fields before fading again. The house was dreaming still, but the dreams were kind. That night, when the family gathered for supper, Arthur raised his glass. "To the burrow," he said, his voice warm and clear, "to the home that remembers us even when we forget it." "To the burrow," they echoed, and laughter filled the room. But beyond the laughter, in the quiet dark of the orchard, something else stirred. A single tree, one of the oldest oaks near the fence, glowed faintly beneath its roots. The ground pulsed with the same rhythm as the heart below, but this light was brighter, more vivid. It spread along the tree's roots, weaving through the soil until it reached the garden wall. There it lingered as the waiting. Inside, Ginny felt the faintest tug in her chest. A whisper brushed her mind, soft and familiar. "Thank you, Guardian." She looked up sharply, glancing around, but the others were still talking and laughing. Her pulse quickened. "Harry," she murmured. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Nothing," she said quickly, though her voice trembled. That night, as the others slept, Ginny slipped outside. Snowflakes spiraled through the moonlight, and the orchard stood still and silent. The air shimmered faintly around the oak, the same one where the mirror had once been buried. She approached slowly, her breath clouding the air. "Hello," she whispered. A faint warmth spread through the ground. Then, from the bark of the oak, a figure began to form, not of flesh or light, but of swirling frost and memory. It was shaped like a woman, tall and graceful, her features blurred by the moon's pale glow. Her voice was as soft as the wind. "Child of the house," the spirit said, "your gift has awakened what once slept. The burrow lives because you chose to remember." Ginny swallowed hard. "Who are you?" "I am the echo of the heart," said the woman. "Long ago, when the first guardian bound the land, he wove part of his love into its soil. That love took form, mine. I have waited through centuries of silence, through war and laughter and storm, until the heart was whole again." Ginny stepped closer. "Are you dangerous?" The spirit's smile was faint and kind. "Not to those who love. I am what the burrow feels, when it keeps you safe, when it mends its own cracks, when its fire burns warm through the night. I am its memory of warmth." Ginny hesitated. "Why are you showing yourself to me?" "Because you gave what was dearest," said the spirit, "and now you are part of the heart. It will answer you when you call." The words filled Ginny with awe and quiet fear. "You mean I can speak to it when you need it most?" said the woman. "But take heed. Such bonds are double-edged. The heart feels all that you feel. If despair roots within you, so too will it take root within the house. Protect your joy, Guardian, for it protects all who dwell here." The spirit began to fade, her outline dissolving into frost and moonlight. "Wait," Ginny called. "Will we see you again?" "When the house remembers," the voice whispered. And then she was gone. The frost beneath Ginny's feet glowed once more, then dimmed into stillness. The orchard was silent again. When she returned to bed, she lay awake long after the fire burned low, her thoughts filled with the strange calm of that spectral encounter. She felt the burrow's quiet pulse beneath her, steady and strong. It was no longer just a house. It was a living thing, bound to her blood and to her love. In the following days, life at the burrow grew almost enchanted. The house seemed to anticipate their needs before they spoke. When Molly hummed, the kettle began to whistle in tune. When Arthur lost his spectacles, they floated gently down from the shelf into his hands. Even the ghoul in the attic had grown unusually well behaved, content to thump softly in rhythm with the ticking of the clock. But one evening, as the sun sank behind the snowy hills, Ginny noticed something new. A small door, one she'd never seen before, had appeared in the far corner of the attic hallway. Its surface was carved with faint runes, pulsing with soft green light. She stared, heart pounding. The house was still dreaming, and its dreams were not yet done. Outside, snow fell in silence, blanketing the orchard once more. Deep beneath the roots, the heart of the burrow glowed brighter than ever, its pulse strong, steady, eternal, echoing through every brick, every beam, and every soul who called it home. The burrow lived, and as long as a Weasley drew breath beneath its roof, it would never sleep again. The new door at the top of the attic stairs stood silent and unassuming, as though it had always been there. By day it blended into the crooked wall, its pale wood catching only a hint of sunlight from the small round window. But by night it pulsed faintly with a soft green glow, the same color as the light that once shimmered beneath the orchard. Ginny had discovered it 3 days ago, and though she told no one at first, she felt it watching her each time she passed. Not menacingly, no, the feeling was more like being quietly invited. The burrow had made the door for a reason. On the 4th evening, she could bear her curiosity no longer. The others were downstairs, the sound of laughter drifting up the stairwell. Molly was singing under her breath. Fred and George were trying to charm the pudding to dance, and Arthur was muttering fondly about Muggle batteries. Life had returned to its easy rhythm, but above it all, that faint heartbeat still hummed in the walls, like the echo of something deeper, older. Ginny climbed the stairs alone. The air in the attic was cool and dust-scented, filled with the faint creaks and sighs of an ancient house settling into the night. The ghoul thumped once from the rafters as if in lazy greeting. She stood before the door. Its handle was brass, worn smooth, the runes upon its surface softly aglow. When she reached out, warmth met her fingertips. "You made this for me," she whispered. The door answered with a low hum that resonated through her bones. She turned the handle. The hinges did not creak. The door swung open soundlessly, revealing a narrow spiral stair descending into the darkness below the roof beams, a place that could not exist, for there had never been such a stair inside the burrow. A faint light shimmered below, like candle fire seen through water. Ginny hesitated only once before stepping through. The door closed behind her. Down she went, each step echoing softly. The stair was impossibly long, curling downward in gentle turns that defied logic. The deeper she descended, the warmer the air became, until at last she reached the bottom and stepped into a chamber she had never seen before. It was vast, carved of pale stone that seemed to glow faintly from within. In the center stood a pool of still water, its surface glass smooth. Runes shimmered around its edge, pulsing faintly with that same green light. Above it hung a lantern made of crystal, burning with quiet golden flame. She knew, without needing to be told, that this was part of the heart. The burrow had opened itself to her. The surface of the water rippled. Slowly, an image began to form. A face, not a ghostly stranger, but her own reflection. Yet the reflection smiled before she did. "Welcome," said the reflection. Its voice echoed like a whisper across a canyon. "You have come to the heart's mirror where memory and magic meet." Ginny swallowed. "I thought the mirror was gone." "The mirror of danger was broken," said her reflection. "This one is different. It shows not fear, but truth." Ginny stepped closer. "Then tell me, why have you brought me here?" The reflection's expression softened. "The heart of the burrow has awoken fully. It remembers all who have lived and loved beneath its roof. Yet it feels something missing, a thread that was lost when the wars scarred this land. The heart was meant to guard not one family, but many. When the goblin fires raged and the wizards turned upon one another, the other homes fell. Only the burrow endured. Now it must decide whether to remain a shelter or to become a beacon. Ginny frowned. A beacon? If the heart opens fully, said the reflection, it will call to others, wandering souls, lost places, forgotten magics. The Hollow of Hearths may live again. But such awakening comes with peril, for what answers the call is not always kind. Ginny felt her pulse quicken. You're saying the burrow could summon other ancient magics here? Yes, said the reflection. And if it does, you must guide it. You are its guardian now. Ginny looked down at the runes surrounding the pool. They glowed brighter as she thought, as if responding to her heartbeat. How do I guide it? Through will, the voice said. Through love, through memory. The light deepened and the air shimmered. Images flickered across the water's surface. The Weasley family through the years, her parents' laughter, Fred and George as children, Bill teaching her to fly, Ron's crooked grin, the countless dinners, the quarrels, the Christmas mornings, every moment of warmth and chaos that had shaped their home. This is your strength, said the voice. This is what the dark cannot touch. The heart draws power not from spells, but from joy. Tears pricked her eyes. Then why show me danger? Why warn me? Because the heart's call has already begun. The reflection's smile faded. The water darkened, shadows rising from its depths. Shapes moved within the blackness, figures cloaked in smoke, faceless and silent. They are remnants, whispered the reflection, echoes of those who lost their homes. The Hollow of Hearths was not built by wizards alone. When it burned, spirits and magics were scattered. Now they have heard the burrow's song. A chill ran through Ginny. Will they harm us? Not yet, said the reflection, but they will seek warmth, and if they cannot find it, they will take it. You must strengthen the heart before they arrive. You must teach the burrow to open its doors wisely. The reflection reached out from the water. Ginny felt a pulse of energy flow through her chest, a warmth that spread to her fingertips. This gift will help you listen, the voice said. The burrow will speak more clearly now, but beware. To hear a living house is to hear its dreams as well as its truths. The image began to fade, the water returning to stillness. Wait, Ginny called. How will I know when they come? The voice echoed faintly, already dissolving into silence. You will know when the hearth burns green once more. Then the light went out. Ginny stumbled back, heart racing. The chamber dimmed, the runes flickering to a faint glow that guided her once more to the spiral stair. She climbed quickly, feeling the faint thrum of magic in the walls, the whisper of something ancient watching. When she reached the attic, the door closed gently behind her. She stood there for a long time, breathing hard, the sound of her pulse echoing faintly with the deeper heartbeat of the house. She did not need to look to know that the hearth below had flickered strangely in her absence, that the burrow was already listening more closely than before. And far beyond its walls, in the snow-covered valley, faint glimmers of light had begun to stir, tiny wandering sparks moving slowly through the mist. Old magics drawn by the call of a home that still remembered. The Hollow of Hearths was waking again, and the burrow, faithful and dreaming, waited for what would come. The snow did not stop for 3 days. It fell in patient silence, laying thick upon the crooked roof of the burrow until it looked like something out of a storybook. An island of warmth surrounded by a sea of white. Smoke drifted softly from the chimney, and from within came the muffled sounds of laughter, footsteps, and the soft crackle of the fire. But beneath that comfort, the house trembled with new energy. The very air seemed alive with whispering magic. Candles burned brighter, the walls glowed faintly at dusk, and even the old kitchen clock ticked in rhythm with the slow heartbeat that pulsed deep below the earth. The burrow was waking fully now, and its dreams were spreading. Ginny could feel it most keenly. Every time she touched the banister or brushed her hand against the door frame, a ripple of warmth answered. Sometimes she thought she heard faint music, the echo of voices singing in another language, old and wistful. At night, when all slept, she would sit by her window and watch the orchard. The trees glowed faintly under the moonlight, and sometimes she glimpsed movement among them, small lights weaving between the trunks like will-o'-the-wisps. She had not told anyone of her descent into the heart's chamber. Not yet. The words of the reflection haunted her still. The hollow of hearths may live again. That night she dreamed. In her dream, the house stood before her as it always had, but larger, vaster, stretching far beyond its own crooked boundaries. The orchard rolled endlessly into mist. Shapes moved within the fog, homes, cottages, towers, and keeps, all shadowed and broken. She heard the faint sound of crying children, of whispers calling through the dark. Then came a flash of green fire racing through the mist like wind through dry grass. The shadows turned toward it, their cries rising to a fevered pitch. One by one they began to move, drifting toward the light of the burrow, drawn by its warmth. When Ginny woke, her room was cold and her breath hung in the air. The next morning, Arthur found something strange. A trail of footprints led from the orchard to the edge of the garden, bare, small, and faintly glowing green. They stopped just short of the door. "The same light as the heart," Hermione murmured, crouching to inspect them. "They're not footprints exactly, more like impressions in the frost. Energy residue." "Something's been here," Arthur said, frowning. "But if it meant harm, the wards would have flared." "Maybe not harm," Ginny said softly. "Maybe hope." The others looked at her curiously, but she turned away. She could feel the house stirring again, its heartbeat quickening with recognition. That evening the first visitor came. It was well past dusk when a knock sounded at the front door, a slow, uncertain knock, like someone unused to asking for shelter. Molly, startled, wiped her hands on her apron and hurried to answer. A woman stood there cloaked in gray. Snow clung to her hair, which shimmered faintly as though dusted with frost. Her face was pale, her eyes ancient and weary, but her voice was soft when she spoke. "I heard the fire," she said, "and the warmth." Molly blinked. "Good heavens, you'll freeze out there. Come in, dear, come in." The woman stepped inside. At once the candles flared, and the temperature in the kitchen rose. The woman's gaze roamed slowly over the walls, the hearth, the crooked beams overhead. "I remember this place," she murmured. "Once, long ago, there were others like it." Arthur came forward. "And who might you be, ma'am?" The woman's smile was faint and strange. "A guest?" she said. "Nothing more. I walked a long road following the echo of home. The hollow of hearths sang again, and I came." Hermione's eyes widened. "She's one of them," she whispered. "A spirit from the old places." The woman inclined her head. "A fragment, perhaps. A keeper of fires long cold. I mean you no harm. I only wish to sit by the flame a while. Molly, ever the hostess, nodded uncertainly and gestured to the hearth. Of course. You must be hungry. Let me fetch something warm. But as the stranger approached the fire, the flames turned green. They danced higher, brighter, filling the room with soft, shimmering light. The air grew thick with magic. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then Ginny stepped forward. It's all right, she said. She's answering the call. The heart called her here. The woman smiled at her. You are the guardian. Yes, said Ginny, and this house, this heart, belongs to those who seek warmth, not war. The woman bowed her head. Then peace to you, child. May the heart's fire never fade. She reached into her cloak and withdrew something small, a charm of twisted silver, shaped like a flame. For your hearth, she said, placing it upon the mantel. The fire flared once more, golden again, steady and calm. When they looked back to thank her, the woman was gone. Only snowflakes drifted where she had stood. Arthur exhaled slowly. That wasn't a ghost, he said. That was something older. Hermione nodded. The first echo has answered. The Hollow of Hearths is opening again. That night, none of them slept deeply. The burrow hummed with energy as though whispering to unseen friends. Now and then, faint lights flickered in the orchard. More of them this time, each moving closer, brighter. By dawn, a faint green shimmer surrounded the house, wrapping it in a soft veil of magic. Over breakfast, Ron muttered, So, just to be clear, our house is now hosting ancient spirits of lost hearths? Seems so, Fred said cheerfully. We should start charging rent. But Molly gave him a look that silenced even his humor. They are guests, she said firmly, and guests are to be treated kindly. Arthur nodded. The burrow has chosen. If the Hollow of Hearths is waking again, perhaps it's time the world remembered what home truly means. Ginny listened, her gaze distant. Deep inside, she could feel the heart's pulse growing stronger, expanding outward. It was no longer a single heartbeat. It was many, joining together in rhythm. That night, as snow fell once more, she stood in the orchard and looked toward the horizon. Faint glimmers danced in the distance, tiny sparks of green and gold moving through the mist. The other homes were waking, their ancient fires answering the call. A smile touched her lips. Welcome back, she whispered. The wind carried her words away, gentle and sure. The world beyond the burrow stirred, alive with memory, and beneath her feet the buried heart beat steady, proud, and unyielding. The Hollow of Hearths had begun to breathe again, and the burrow, faithful, dreaming, eternal, stood as its first light. The snow melted with the first breath of spring, revealing the sodden earth and tangled roots beneath the orchard. The burrow stood proud amid the thaw, its crooked walls gleaming with morning dew, its chimney puffing out white curls that mingled with the mist. The heart beneath the house beat strong and steady, and with each pulse the world around it seemed to hum a little louder, a little brighter. Ginny Weasley could feel it in everything, the trees, the air, even the river that curved past the garden. The Hollow of Hearths was stirring beyond sight. She could sense distant lights now far across the hills, as though unseen fires were waking in answer to the burrow's call. Each night when she dreamed, she saw them more clearly. Old cottages, ruined halls, and forgotten homes rekindling with warmth. Yet peace never lingers long where magic stirs. One evening, as the family gathered by the hearth, Hermione laid a parchment on the table. "I found something," she said. Old records from the ministry, ancient, buried deep in the Department of Mysteries. They mentioned the hollow of hearths. Arthur adjusted his spectacles. The ministry has records of it? Barely, Hermione replied. Most of it was destroyed long ago. But there's one account that survived. An unspeakable, who warned that when the hollow wakes, it draws more than warmth and kindness. There are darker magics that long for home, too. Fred leaned forward. You mean ghosts with bad manners? Hermione frowned. Not ghosts. Shadows? Fragments of spells gone wrong, pieces of souls bound to old places. They called them the Wanderers of Ash. When the hollow stirs, they follow the fire, seeking to claim its heart. Molly paled. And the burrow's the brightest fire of all. Arthur took her hand gently. We've faced dark things before. We'll face this too. But Ginny said nothing. Deep inside, she could feel the heart's pulse quickening, as though it already knew what was coming. That night, as she lay awake, the house whispered softly around her, timbers sighing, rafters creaking, a low hum that seemed almost to speak. They are coming, it murmured. Guard the flame. When dawn came, the orchard was cloaked in mist. The frost had retreated, but the air held a strange stillness. Even the birds were silent. Ginny stepped outside, her breath ghosting in the cool morning air. The grass was damp beneath her boots, and the scent of earth and river filled her lungs. At first she saw nothing unusual. Then the mist shifted, and shapes emerged. Figures of smoke and shadow, moving slowly through the trees. They had no faces, no form, only outlines of men and women wrapped in swirling gray. Their movements were restless, searching. Wherever they drifted, frost crept across the ground. The Wanderers, she whispered. The heart beneath her feet thudded once, deep and heavy, and warmth rippled outward. The closest shadow froze, then turned toward her. Ginny? Harry's voice broke through the mist. He ran toward her, wand drawn, Hermione and Ron close behind. We saw them from the window. They're not attacking, Ginny said. They're searching. Hermione's wand glowed softly. For what? The flame, Ginny murmured. They want warmth. They want the heart. As if in answer, one of the shadows surged forward, tendrils of smoke curling toward the orchard floor. Harry raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. Silver light burst from his wand, the shape of a stag leaping through the air. It struck the shadow and scattered it like ash, but the others closed in, whispering in hollow voices. Hermione gritted her teeth. They're too many. Ginny closed her eyes, feeling the heartbeat beneath the earth. She reached for it, not with her wand, but with her will. Help me, she thought. You are the hearth. You are home. The ground pulsed with warmth. A green light spread outward from the roots of the orchard, coiling around her feet. The shadows faltered, their smoky forms shivering under the glow. Back to the house, Arthur shouted from the doorway. Inside, all of you. They ran. The moment they crossed the threshold, the burrow responded. The door slammed shut of its own accord, and every candle flared to life. The walls hummed, runes glowing faintly along the beams. Outside, the shadows circled, pressing against the unseen barrier that shimmered around the home. Their whispers grew louder, echoing through the air. Molly gripped her wand tightly. How long can the wards hold? As long as the burrow remembers, said Hermione, eyes scanning the glowing runes. But the heart's energy is spreading. The more it calls to the hollow, the more these creatures will come. Ginny pressed a hand against the wall. The wood felt warm beneath her palm, alive. Then I'll strengthen it. Arthur turned toward her sharply. "Ginny." But she was already moving. She stepped to the hearth, where the green fire burned softly in the grate. The silver charm the spirit had left, a tiny flame, still rested above it, gleaming faintly. "The heart listens to me," she said. "If it's awake, it needs direction. It needs to know that warmth belongs to life, not to the cold." She took a deep breath and touched the charm. Instantly, heat rushed through her body. The room vanished in a blinding flare of emerald light. She saw everything, the roots of the burrow stretching like veins through the soil, the glowing heart pulsing beneath, the faint lights of other homes answering across the countryside. But beyond them, in the dark places where no fires burned, she saw movement, shadows gathering like storm clouds. "You cannot have it," she whispered. "This home is ours." She poured her memory into the heart, the laughter, the voices, the smell of her mother's cooking, the creak of the stairs, the warmth of every Christmas morning. The light within her chest blazed brighter than before, flowing outward in a wave of gold and green. The shadows screamed. Their whispers turned to wails as the light swept through them, unraveling their smoky forms into nothingness. The frost melted, the mist lifted, and when the glow faded, the orchard stood empty once more. Ginny gasped, staggering back. Harry caught her as she swayed. "You did it," he said softly. Outside, the first true sunlight of spring broke through the clouds, spilling over the snow-damp earth. The house creaked softly, as if sighing in relief. Hermione wiped a tear from her cheek. "The heart's stronger now. The hollow will keep growing, but so will its guardianship. The light will spread as far as the warmth can reach." Arthur placed a hand over his heart. "Then the burrow's done what it was meant to do. It's become a beacon." As the day passed, a peace settled over the valley. The air smelled of thawing earth and fresh beginnings. By evening, the orchard shimmered faintly again, not with danger, but with life, small lights darting among the branches like fireflies. Ginny sat by the window that night, watching them. She could feel the faint hum of the heart beneath her, steady and strong. She thought of the spirit's words. "What lives in memory never dies." The burrow lived now as more than a home. It was a promise, a heartbeat against the darkness, a light that would never go out. And as the stars wheeled slowly above the hills, Ginny smiled, knowing the hollow of hearths had been reborn, and that the burrow, beloved and eternal, would guard its flame for all generations to come. The spring months rolled forward like a long exhale after a storm. The burrow stood radiant in the lengthening light, its roof patched anew by Arthur's careful charm work, its garden teeming with the first hints of green. Beneath the orchard, the earth pulsed faintly, steady as a heartbeat, though now the rhythm was softer, content as though the house itself rested. No one spoke much of the shadows that had come from the mist. The Weasleys were used to strangeness, and when peace returned, they clung to it with both hands. The laughter of family once more filled the crooked halls, and the scent of bread and lilac drifted through the open windows. Still, there were moments, quiet moments, when each of them paused and felt the hum beneath the floorboards, that low, secret reminder that their home was more than walls and timber. Ginny, however, could not forget. Though she smiled and worked and lived as before, something had changed within her since the night she faced the wanderers. When she stood alone in the garden, she could sense more than the house's heart. She could feel the threads of other places far away. faint, glowing lights, each one a hearth, awakened by the burrow's call. The hollow of hearths was spreading, and she could feel it growing stronger with each day. One evening, she found Hermione sitting on the back step, reading by the light of a hovering lantern. The warm air hummed with the chorus of frogs and the faint crackle of fire from the kitchen. "You can feel it too, can't you?" Ginny asked, sitting beside her. Hermione closed her book. "The hollow?" She nodded. "It's not only here anymore. Last week I visited Luna in Dorset. Her house, well, her father's house, it's been abandoned since the war. But when I walked past it, the lights were burning inside. No one was there. I think it answered your call." Ginny smiled faintly. "Luna always said, houses have souls." "She was right," Hermione said softly. "But Ginny, I think it's more than warmth the hollow is drawing now. I've been studying the energy in the air. Magic itself feels thicker, older, almost like the world is remembering something it forgot." Ginny looked toward the orchard, where the branches moved in the evening wind. The heart doesn't belong to one family anymore. The burrow was just the first to wake. It's calling the others home. Hermione was silent for a moment, then asked, "Does it frighten you?" Ginny considered. "It did once, but not anymore. The hollow doesn't want power, it wants peace. It's gathering every forgotten spark of kindness left in the world and giving them a place to rest." Hermione's eyes softened. "That sounds like something your mother would say." Ginny laughed quietly. "She'd say it while waving a spoon, probably." They both smiled, but even as they talked far across the valley, strange lights began to shimmer on the horizon, green and gold, flickering like distant lanterns in the dusk. The following morning, a knock came at the door. It was not loud, but it was steady and deliberate, and when Arthur opened it, a man stood waiting on the step. He was dressed in travel-worn robes the color of ash, his beard flecked with white, and his eyes glimmered like coals in the half-light. "Forgive the intrusion," he said with a bow. "I am called Thane. I followed the light that burns in this house." Arthur frowned slightly. "You've come far, then." "From the northern moors," said the man, "where the winds howl through empty cottages, and no fire has burned for a century. But 3 nights past, I saw a green flame upon the clouds, and the air tasted of a hearth smoke. So I came." Ginny appeared behind her father. "You heard the burrow's call." The man inclined his head. "The hollow of hearths has stirred again. There are others who remember, keepers of old magics, wanderers who once guarded the first homes. They gather even now, drawn by the pulse that beats beneath your orchard." Hermione stepped forward. "If they mean peace, they're welcome. But if they seek to control the heart..." Thane raised a hand. "No, none would dare. The heart cannot be commanded. It listens only to love and to lineage. But know this, your light burns brighter than all others, and there are those who envy such warmth. The hollow's awakening has been seen by more than friends." Arthur's eyes darkened. "You mean the ministry?" "Not them," Thane said quietly. "Older things. Those who feed on the forgotten, who dwell where no hearth burns. The hollow's return threatens their dominion of cold." Ginny felt a chill crawl along her spine. "The shadows we fought?" "Lesser echoes," said Thane. "The true ones will come when the heart's call reaches its fullest song." He looked toward the orchard where sunlight glimmered on the budding leaves. "But do not despair. Fire endures. I have seen it. Let the heart call as it must, and When the time comes, the keepers will stand with you." He bowed once more, then turned and vanished into the morning mist, his footprints fading before they touched the grass. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Arthur exhaled. "It seems our family gatherings are becoming rather more legendary." But Molly, who had stood silently by the hearth through it all, whispered, "If there's another darkness coming, I'll not see it take my home." Ginny met her mother's gaze and smiled. "It won't, Mom. The burrow knows how to protect its own." That night the air outside shimmered faintly, and the burrow's windows glowed soft gold, long after the lamps had been extinguished. Beneath the earth, the heart beat steady and sure. Yet somewhere far beyond, in the cold reaches of the unseen world, something stirred, a low murmur, like the rustle of dead leaves. In her sleep, Ginny dreamed again. She saw a valley wide and green, filled with countless hearth fires stretching to the horizon. Between them walked figures cloaked in warmth and light, carrying lanterns of emerald flame. And beyond the valley's edge, the darkness shifted, waiting. When she woke, the dawn was breaking. The sky was pale rose, and the first birds sang in the hedgerows. She felt no fear, only determination. The Hollow of Hearths was reborn, but its song was not yet finished. Somewhere ahead, a reckoning awaited, the meeting of warmth and cold, memory and forgetting. Ginny stood at her window, feeling the house breathe around her. She knew the burrow would not fail. It had endured war, sorrow, and time itself. It would stand through whatever came next. The light of the morning sun spilled across the orchard, gleaming off the frost-tipped grass like tiny fires. The heart beneath the soil pulsed once, slow and strong, and the burrow's walls seemed to murmur in reply. Whatever darkness gathered, the hearth was ready. And in the heart of the Weasley home, where laughter and love had never truly died, the ancient magic of warmth kept watch. The valley awoke in a flood of gold. Spring had ripened into early summer, and every blade of grass glistened with dew. The burrow stood as it always had, crooked and beloved, its red roof catching the sun, its windows winking with warmth. Yet beneath that gentle peace, the ancient pulse of magic throbbed, deep and steady, echoing like a heartbeat through the very stones. To those who did not know its history, it was merely a wizard's home. But to those who had felt its living heart, the burrow was a fortress of memory, its foundation older than the Weasleys themselves, its spirit bound to the hollow of hearths that now stretched unseen across England's hills. The world had forgotten the old warmth once, and now, piece by piece, it remembered. On that bright morning, Ginny walked through the orchard barefoot. The trees had leafed fully, their branches heavy with promise. Each step she took hummed with life. Each breath carried the scent of apple blossom and damp soil. She paused at the old oak, the place where the mirror had once lain buried. Beneath her feet, the soil shimmered faintly. "You're awake," she whispered, "all of you." The burrow's pulse answered, a low hum, affectionate and familiar, like the sigh of a friend too vast to see. Harry came up the path behind her, his hands in his pockets, eyes squinting against the light. "Talk into the house again?" Ginny smiled. "It talks back." He stopped beside her, looking over the orchard. "I think it likes you more than the rest of us." "It doesn't like or dislike," she said softly. "It remembers. That's what it was built for, to hold what the world forgets." They stood in silence a moment. Bees droned in the distance. From the open windows of the burrow came the faint sound of Molly's humming and the laughter of Fred and George bickering over breakfast. The world seemed, for a precious heartbeat, entirely at peace. Then the wind shifted. It came down from the north, cold, unnatural, carrying the faint scent of ash. The laughter inside faltered. A shadow passed over the orchard, dimming the light. Ginny's breath caught. It's starting. Harry's wand was already in his hand. The Wanderers again? No, she said, something older, something that doesn't belong in the hollow. A low sound rose from beneath the earth, not the heartbeat of the burrow this time, but a growl, deep and strained, as though the heart itself were resisting something. The air thickened, and from the far edge of the orchard the mist began to crawl once more, black instead of white, glinting faintly with embers. The heart's warmth flared beneath their feet. The orchard trembled. Inside the house, Arthur's voice rang out, "Ginny, Harry, inside now!" But Ginny shook her head. "No, it's come for me, for the guardian." The mist surged forward, swallowing the first row of trees. Shapes took form within it, taller than before, solid now, their hollow faces glimmering with red light. The cold they brought pressed like a weight upon the chest. Harry stepped in front of her. "Then it'll have to get through both of us." But the darkness was not a single creature. It was many. A host of moving shadows that whispered in 1,000 voices. Their words were like frost sliding across glass. Warmth cannot last forever. Fire must fade. Home must fall to silence. The burrow shuddered. The windows flickered. Ginny clenched her fists. "No," she whispered, "not while I breathe." She pressed her hand to the ground, reaching for the heart below. The warmth surged into her palms, bright and burning. She could see it now in her mind's eye, the vast crystal core beneath the earth, beating faster, defiant. She poured her will into it, not fear, not rage, only love. The mist recoiled as a wave of golden light rippled through the orchard. The shapes screamed, their forms twisting, but they did not flee. Instead, they pressed forward, desperate to smother the light. The back door burst open. Arthur, Molly, Hermione, and Ron charged into the garden, wands blazing. Silver and blue fire streaked through the air. The spells met the mist and hissed like rain upon hot stone. "It's feeding on the cold!" Hermione shouted. "We can't fight it with force!" "Then we'll fight it with what it hates," said Molly fiercely. She raised her wand and cried, "Lumos Solis." A flare of white fire burst from her wand, and for an instant, the shadows staggered. Ginny sank to her knees, eyes closed, focusing on the pulse of the house. "You said you'd remember me," she whispered. "Then remember now." The burrow answered. The ground trembled. Light burst from every window, green and gold, pouring upward into the sky. The orchard glowed like dawn. The very air seemed to sing, a low, harmonic resonance that thrummed through their bones. The shadows shrieked, retreating from the blaze. The black mist broke apart, scattering into the wind like ash. For one terrible moment, the world went utterly still. Then, from deep beneath the roots of the earth, the heart beat once more, loud and triumphant. When the light faded, the orchard stood quiet. The grass smoked faintly. The air was warm again, scented with apple and wild flowers. Arthur lowered his wand. "Is it over?" Ginny nodded weakly, her face pale but resolute. "It's done. The cold can't touch the hollow now. It's sealed." Hermione looked toward the horizon, where faint sparks of light glimmered across the distant hills. "The other hearths, they're burning brighter. You've strengthened them all." Molly wrapped her arms around her daughter, tears glinting in her eyes. You've done what no one else could, my girl. You've given warmth back to the world. Ginny smiled faintly, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. It wasn't me. It was the burrow. It was us. That night the stars blazed brighter than they ever had before. The family gathered once more in the kitchen, the fire crackling merrily, its light spilling across the faces they loved. The house hummed softly around them, a lullaby older than speech, a promise that no darkness could break. And somewhere far beyond Ottery St. Catchpole, the hollow of hearths burned anew, hundreds of lights, thousands even, each one a sanctuary, rekindled by the courage of a single home that had refused to fall silent. As sleep claimed them, Ginny dreamed once more of the spirit of Frost who had spoken to her that winter night. The woman stood among endless fields of light, smiling. The heart is whole, the voice said. The warmth endures. When Ginny woke at dawn, the first sunlight spilled through her window, painting her room gold. She rose, listening. Beneath her feet, she heard the faint pulse of the burrow, steady, strong, and alive. The war was over, the shadows gone. The house had become what it was always meant to be, not merely a refuge, but a light for others to follow. She stepped to the window, looking out at the orchard bathed in morning glow. "Thank you," she whispered to the air, and from somewhere deep within the walls, a voice as gentle as the crackle of the hearth answered, "Always, guardian." The burrow, ancient and dreaming, watched the sun rise. The hollow of hearths stretched across the world like a necklace of stars. Warmth, once forgotten, had been restored. And in that humble wizard's home, bound by love, stronger than any spell, the Weasleys' story found its peace.